Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Charles Jr., Mr. Green, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terrelong, Ms. Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brownberg, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Enriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Siblis, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright, Mr. Montague, Mr. Charles Jr.
Statement by ministers.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to join you in welcoming members to this particular sitting, especially, Mr. Speaker, that we did call at very short notice for members to respond, and this being the last sitting before the prorogation of the House for the opening, the ceremonial opening on the 15th of February. And just to enable members to appreciate that we were thinking of a 13th as the last sitting, but it happened to coincide with a day that followed called Ash Wednesday, which is a public holiday, and we couldn't prorogue on a public holiday as is understood. So I'm really grateful to members for coming out at this very short notice, especially recognizing the season that it is now, and, and that everyone is out there on the hosting somewhat. So I really wanted to express my appreciation to members for coming, and that we will conduct the business of the House today with alacrity and, of course, with the usual efficiency that is characteristic of our behavior in recent times, and to look forward to conclusion of the people's business today in good time and in fine style. Mr. Speaker, it is intended to have 3 statements today. One from the Minister of Justice and 2 from the Minister of Entertainment, Gender, Sports and Culture. So at a later point today, we may ask for a recommittal to enable that minister to make those 2 statements. But for now, Mr. Speaker, I invite you to ask the Minister of Justice to make the statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought it's important, Mr. Speaker, to make a statement in light of when we ended last week, there was a division on the bill which we will take at the committee stage. I think it's important to note that there has been a fair amount of collaboration, and this will show in my statement that there has been collaboration between the opposition and the government. Mr. Speaker, I would like to respond to some of the concerns raised by the opposition members. I should circulate. Could you get the speaker one and the... raised by the members of the opposition on January the 30th, 2024, in respect of the bill that is before the House today, entitled An Act to Amend the Political Ombudsman Interim Act and to provide for connected matters. Mr. Speaker, from a substantive point of view, the misgivings of the members of the opposition are that the ECJ has achieved a level of stature locally, regionally, and internationally, which is very valuable and ought not to be diluted by investing the roles and responsibilities of the Office of the Political Ombudsman in the ECJ. It is the view of the opposition, Mr. Speaker, that this investment will change the character of the ECJ by giving it functions that are inconsistent with the detached, independent, and objective nature that the members of the Commission have enjoyed so long. However, Mr. Speaker, we fervently disagree with these submissions made by the opposition in light of the synergistic work carried out by both the Office of the Political Ombudsman and by the ECJ. As I mentioned in the last sitting of the House, Mr. Speaker, regarding this bill, the operation of the Office of the Political Ombudsman is intended to provide oversight of the conduct of the political parties, its members and supporters, by promoting good governance and ensuring that political actors adhere to prescribed code and ethical standards. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, the ECJ is expected to safeguard the democratic foundations of the country by enabling eligible electors to elect their representatives to govern Jamaica through free and fair elections. As there is overlap, Mr. Speaker, in the functions exercised by both commissions of Parliament, and as the chairman of the ECJ has expressed support of the proposal of these functions of the Office of the Political Ombudsman to be subsumed under the ECJ, it is clear that the character of the ECJ shall remain. The ECJ has long established internal protocols for treating with matters that will be adopted and applied to the matters they will now assume. We are not seeking to reinvent the wheel, but to adopt what has worked. Much of what the opposition has said, Mr. Speaker, regarding the very strength of the ECJ, forms the basis upon which the ECJ is believed to be the most appropriate entity to undertake the work of the political ombudsman. The level of stature achieved by the ECJ, locally, internationally, and regionally, is necessary for the functions of the Office of the Political Ombudsman to be fairly and effectively carried out. Investing these responsibilities in a 9-member commission will result in more impactful recommendations made to political parties or its representatives in circumstances where there has been breaches. It is in the nation's interest, Mr. Speaker, to extend the reach of the well-functioning ECJ to close any gaps that may exist in the oversight of the political process and political conduct. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the government refers to Section 8.4 of the Principal Act, which establishes a Commission of Parliament responsible for making recommendations to the Governor General with respect to various commissions of Parliament. And it is to be noted, Mr. Speaker, that this very commission had on previous occasion agreed for the Office of the Political Ombudsman to be subsumed under the ECJ. Now, who are these members, Mr. Speaker, of this committee or commission of Parliament? Section 8.4 of the Political Ombudsman Act lists them again. Who are they? The Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, the person designated by the Prime Minister's leader of government business in the House of Representatives, the person designated by the leader of the opposition as leader of opposition business in the House of Representatives, the person designated by the leader of the opposition as leader of opposition businesses in the Senate, and the minister responsible for the public service. Mr. Speaker, this body consisting of representatives of the Parliament, the Speaker, the President, the leader of government and opposition business, drafted a letter, Mr. Speaker, to the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition. And this, for the record, Mr. Speaker, I'll read in full. It's dated November the 4th, 2022. As you will recall, the Office of the Political Ombudsman was established by the Political Ombudsman Interim Act 2022, the Act, as a commission of Parliament due to the unacceptable levels of politically motivated violence, particularly around elections. Pursuant to Part 3 of the Act, the Office of the Political Ombudsman shall receive complaints, and in accordance with Section 12 of the Act, the OPO, the Office of the Political Ombudsman, shall investigate any action taken by a political party, its members or supporters, where he is of the opinion that such action, A, constitutes or is likely to constitute a breach of any agreement, code, or arrangement for the time being in force between or among political parties in Jamaica, or B, is likely to prejudice good relations between the supporters of various political parties. The central mandate of the OPO is activated mainly during election periods. While this office has tried to expand its purpose, the role of the political ombudsman has proven to still be very limited. This is a letter drafted by these members. Furthermore, just a second, let me finish. You can, we'll give you a copy. Furthermore, it is undeniable that the political landscape has changed significantly since the establishment of the OPO. The culture has shifted. As a result, the prevalence of politically motivated crime has plummeted significantly, so much that it does not appear that there is a need for a commission of Parliament to operate solely on this mandate. Based on the foregoing, the commission constituted under Section 8.4 of the Act, the members I just noted, Mr. Speaker, after careful consideration, has taken the decision not to extend the contract of the current political ombudsman between November 2022. This is before November the 22nd, when she demitted office, which signifies the 7-year tenure stipulated in the Act. The Commission notes that in the process of examining the status of the Office of the Political Ombudsman, the Parliament may wish to consider a move to have the Office of the Political Ombudsman subsumed by the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, as the mandate of the two commissions and their roles in our society have proven to be complementary. This is buttressed by the fact that the Electoral Commission is continuously active, whereas the Office of the Political Ombudsman is most active during election periods which occur generally every 4 or 5 years. The Commission also notes that the bringing together of these two commissions of Parliament would also be a significant cost-sharing measure for the state. This Commission recommends that the Parliament establishes the appropriate mechanism to examine the continued role and function of the OPA and relevant legislation, and hopes that Parliament takes its recommendations under consideration. Mr. Speaker, this is November the 4th, 2022. This letter was sent to the members of this committee, all the members that I just quoted. The Speaker of the House and Chairman of the Political Ombudsman Commission, Honorable Marissa Dalrymple, has prepared a letter to the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition regarding the position taken by this Commission regarding the office of the Political Ombudsman. The Speaker is requesting that you review the attached letter and provide your comments by Thursday, November the 10th, 2022. On November the 10th, they're reminded. And who responded, Mr. Chairman? Who responded? One, Senator Peter Bunting. I have no objection. I would urge the executive. Could be allowed to continue, Mr. Chairman? I would urge the executive to speedily consider the recommendations of the committee so that there will not be a protracted period between the departure of the Ombudsman and the successor arrangements. So, Mr. Speaker, you have a situation where I don't know if Senator Peter Bunting was acting on his own. No, he wasn't. I don't know. I don't know if the letter was received by Leader of the Opposition Business, Philip Paulwell. It was sent to him. Philip Paulwell was a member of the committee. The email was sent to him. And that is why up to last week, Monday, not one member of the opposition were complaining, because we were in collaboration. So, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we have a situation. So, Mr. Speaker, what is very clear is that Senator Peter Bunting provided in his response in the email no objection and say, speedily do this thing. So wait, we're not united. We're not united. Is he a part of RISE? Mr. Speaker, this response, Mr. Speaker, this response,
Minister,
coupled with the
time.
Reading the facts.
Leader of government business. Time.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that the member be allowed sufficient time to complete his
Those in
presentation.
favor? Those against? Ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, this response from a very prominent member of the opposition in the Senate and of the People's National Party, coupled with the motion that was originally moved in Parliament 10 years prior by Member Warmington in 2012, make it sufficiently clear that the members of the opposition were not only consulted, but were in agreement with the assumption of the responsibilities of the office of the Political Ombudsman by the ECJ. This bill simply seeks to give effect to that and nothing more. This, therefore, begs the question, What would have changed between 2022, when the recommendation was last made and accepted, and today? The recommendation for the ECJ to assume the role inconsequent on years of discussion and consultations. This decision has not been taken lightly or without true consideration. Mr. Speaker, the passage of this act will redound to the benefit of future generations, as the assumptions of the functions by the ECJ will allow for the wealth of knowledge and experience in that body to be brought to bear in the performance of the function of the political ombudsman. And, Mr. Speaker, to the best of my recollection, Senator Peter Bonin served in the ECJ when he was General Secretary. He knows how the ECJ operates. And I dare say, so wait, we're not just individuals? We're not just all individuals? We don't talk. We don't talk. Or we're just divided into all parts. So, Mr. Speaker, the role, Mr. Speaker, the role that we're asking the ECJ to perform is one which they have performed on many occasions. In 1997, our Prime Minister had to endure a decision by the ECJ because of what took place in the constituency. Fine. In 2007, no problem, no problem. All right, I want to. In 2007, Member of Parliament for Southwest, Member of Parliament for Southwest, Southeast, St. Elizabeth, had problems in the run-up to the election. Wrote the political ombudsman, the then political ombudsman. Nothing happened, really. And he had to write the ECJ. And the ECJ took all three members running, PNP, JLP, and NDM, 2007, brought them together and told them, stop the campaigning until the political intimidation stopped. Fine? So, Mr. Speaker, what I can say to this, my colleagues on the opposition, you have a 9-member, you have a situation, Mr. Speaker, where 9 members, 4 selected members, the director of the election, can I be allowed to finish? And you have, Mr. Speaker, 2 representatives of the 2 main political parties. I think it is cheap and outrageous to say that this body could be partisan. I think it is unmeritorious to say that this body, I think it is unmeritorious to say that this body can't continue to act independently.
The member is misleading the House on two separate occasions. Nobody on this side said that the ECJ would be partisan. Nobody used those terms, right? We raised concerns about the impact on the ECJ. Nobody said it would be partisan. And secondly, the member has said what took place in 1997 in relation to the constituency of West Central St. Andrew. It went to an election tribunal, and that is how it was resolved there, not through the ECJ. So please, with your arguments, don't mislead the House.
Mr. Speaker, it is clear to me that we have an independent, non-partisan body that can make a decision. That body, when it makes a decision, I said last week, the chairman has indicated that once it makes a decision, be it by consensus, be it by majority decision, the decision is indivisible. The decision comes across to the political parties. Mr. Speaker, I urge the opposition, Get back to basics. Let us have this thing done. Let us have a political ombudsman in place without any political considerations, because this body can perform this role, not only with independence, with fairness, and with the credibility and integrity that they have done in the past. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope when we get to committee stage, we can just move through very quickly.
Yeah. Bring the thing, please. What are you doing? Thank you. Mr. Speaker, last week the debate closed and the matter was about to be sent to committee. We intended to divide on the motion to send it to committee on second reading, and the debate was suspended. Today, because the minister has already spoken in the debate, he has elected to make a statement so he can reopen the issues which he already spoke to when he closed the debate last week. I think it's an abuse of the procedure of the House. Secondly, in his own statement, he makes much of the decision of a committee or a commission of Parliament, which is established under Section 8.4 of the Principal Act. That commission, which is comprised of the leader of government business, opposition business, of the House, of the Senate, and so on, is established to make recommendations relating to the emoluments of the political ombudsman, the emoluments of the political ombudsman. And there had been concerns for some time that having the office of the political ombudsman as a permanent expense, especially during periods when there is very little political activity on the ground, was not a good system. And the decision was that, of that committee, as I understand it, or that commission, was that the ECJ should be utilized to provide administrative support to an officer who could play the role of the political ombudsman. That was what the understanding at that time was. When this bill came here last week, which we never saw before it was tabled, on which there was no consultation with us whatsoever, what was being proposed in that bill, or is being proposed in that bill, is that the commissioners, the 9 commissioners, should become the political ombudsman. In other words, involving the commissioners in the adjudication process of disputes which arise during a campaign in particular, such as what has happened recently, where in St. Thomas, if you make it part of
No, just a point about a leader of opposition. The commission of Parliament, which is not binding in any way, but is a commission constituted, as you mentioned, was very clear in its recommendation. And it wasn't as you have put it. The letter to which members of the commission responded was a letter from the Speaker being sent on behalf of the commission to your office and to the office of the Prime Minister, and the office of the Prime Minister. And the letter said, if I may read it. Oh, I wasn't here. He read it earlier? Okay. Right. No, the point being made by it is that what has emerged with a bill that was tabled here last week, the point being made is that that did not emerge as a frolic of the minister. That came from a recommendation of a commission that consists of members of the opposition and members of the government. And the letter clearly expressed the opinion to both leaders of both
And it was
political
never
parties, that the Electoral Commission
What is the point
assumes the role previously held by the leader, by the political ombudsman.
I don't know what that point of order was. It's not clear to me. My understanding, at the time, I was aware that the Commission of Parliament was deliberating on this issue as to how to save costs. And what was being proposed was that the ECJ and the Electoral Office would assume administrative support for the function of the political ombudsman, which might be housed in that office. Never was it discussed that the commissioners would become the political ombudsman, and to suggest otherwise is simply untrue. That was not on the table at the time. The first time we heard about that proposal was when this bill was tabled by the Minister of Justice in this House. And we fundamentally disagree with it. We expressed our reasons cogently last week. We were joined by one member on the other side who spoke very resolutely and convincingly on the matter as well. And when the debate was suspended, we anticipated some discussions as to how to move forward in a collaborative way. There have been no such discussions. All that has happened is that they've come back now to ram this bill through today, despite the concerns of us and the wider society on the matter. It is disgraceful. And this letter, this is not even a signed letter. This letter is an unsigned letter that was emailed as a draft among the committee members. One member of the committee from our side expressed his agreement with the idea of the ECJ absorbing those costs because it's a more administratively efficient way of doing it. Never that the ECJ commissioners should become the persons who adjudicate on these very partisan matters.
No, point of order. You have the content of the letter there. The member expressed agreement with the content of the letter. The letter did not speak.
Minister, stop. Two persons can't be on the floor at the same time. You're raising a point of order?
He's raised it already.
Sorry.
No, but you're repeating.
Can you just turn the mic off?
No, but
opposition leader, please.
No, leader of opposition, you're repeating the point. It need not be a contentious issue. All we're trying to do is establish certain facts. And the member contends that the commission was concerned with absorbing the costs of the political ombudsman into the Electoral Commission. That is not factual. The letter to which members of the commission expressed agreement was very clear, and that letter was circulated to members of the commission, and the letter said the commission notes that in the process of examining the status of the Office of Political Ombudsman, the Parliament may wish to consider, a move, so it's a recommendation. It's not binding, it's a recommendation. A move to have the Office of the Political Ombudsman subsumed by the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, as the mandate of the two commissions and their roles in our society have proven to be complementary. This is buttressed by the fact that the Electoral Commission is continuously active. So the point I'm making is that you are contending that the letter spoke to subsuming the costs of the political ombudsman. And I'm saying the letter went broader than that. We can have Hansard repeat what you said. The letter which was a draft, spoke to the idea of the Electoral Commission assuming the role and functions of the political ombudsman, and it was a recommendation. But it's not about saying it was only a cost only. That is my point. That's misleading.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I did not speak to what the letter said or didn't say. I spoke to the underlying ideas that were coming out of that commission as to how to address the issue of cost, which was a primary concern of the commission, a commission that was there to deal with the emoluments of the political ombudsman. And the wording in the letter is quite nebulous and vague, and the specific recommendations never contemplated the commissioners themselves becoming an adjudicatory body for these types of disputes like we had in St. Thomas yesterday, like we had in with the Trinityville councillor yesterday. That was never contemplated. And Mr. Speaker, we have already indicated why we don't agree with this approach. We think it is going to bring the Electoral Commission into the fray of adjudicating on very partisan matters, heated matters, in the course of a political campaign. That has never been their role, and it is a mistake, a bad policy, to bring them into that role. We disagree with it fundamentally. And if one member of that commission felt otherwise, that was not the considered view of, that may be a personal view. And in any event, having discussed the matter with him, I am aware that his understanding was that this was a cost-cutting measure to provide administrative support for the political ombudsman through the ECJ, providing the secretariat services and having somebody, not necessarily a permanent officer, who would play that role, and the political ombudsman role. It was never discussed that 9 commissioners would become the adjudicators of disputes of this nature. Furthermore, we had suggested last week, behind the Speaker's chair, that we could put in place, by agreement, a panel of 3 persons, eminent persons, who could play the role of adjudicating any issues in the current local government election campaign. And they could provide it with some secretarial support, and they could provide it with a stipend, and their services would end when the campaign ends. We've had no feedback on that proposal. We want to see somebody or some body of persons playing the role of what the political ombudsman is supposed to play. In fact, I'm aware that a submission was made to you, Minister Chuck, today by a former political ombudsman, because the person shared it with me, suggesting that an appointment be made for 1 year, that the amendment should be for the law to be changed for 1 year. So, yes. Well, you may not have seen it. Yeah. The idea of a political ombudsman being appointed for a period of 12 months, during which the whole future of that office can be considered. I don't know what the feeling is on that side. Apparently you didn't receive that proposal from the person. The point is that there are other approaches that can be taken to address this issue, which will not undermine the role of the ECJ, will not bifurcate the very single and important role of the ECJ in determining the system, the electoral system of Jamaica. They are the ones in charge of our system, of our boundaries and our rules and regulations that govern our elections. And they've done it extremely well, and they're an institution in which Jamaica is well pleased and has received international recognition. Now we want to make them, the 9 of them, somehow some kind of tribunal of fact, getting into very partisan matters and having to make determinations which will no doubt not find favor with the side against whom it is the ruling is.
Members.
What? I really shouldn't talk to a parliamentarian like that. Yeah.
Thank you very Thank you very much. May I, first and foremost, Madam Member, Member from St. Andrews, Southwestern. There is a system that has been newly installed. And before you get the chance to speak, the mic must be on. You raised and you started to make your comment. I did not hear you ask for time to speak. And so therefore, I would not have acknowledged you. Sorry, you start speaking before you even turn the mic on. And if I'm going to rule, then I have to rule on both sides. You ask if there's a speaker in the house. Yes, there's a speaker in the house. But a speaker will not go down to the level of having a kias. Therefore, we must continue to behave like adults. No. The members' time was up. Leader.
With regard to the, yes, I would respectfully ask member, how much time do you have? How much time do you need? Normally we give you 3 minutes for it. Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the standing order requirements, I beg to move that the member's time be extended by 5 minutes. Please.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Leader of Government Business. So, whatever the motivations and thinking were behind the Commission having this draft letter prepared, it apparently was never signed. I don't recall ever seeing this letter. My understanding was that the primary motivation of the commissioners at the time was to save costs. And the idea of the ECJ providing basically the secretarial support for the political ombudsman that could be an officer housed within the ECJ found favor with the member who was referred to at the time by the Minister Chuck. What has come here is a totally different thing. What has come here is to make the commissioners themselves the political ombudsman acting indivisibly. I don't think it's workable. There are no regulations to govern their procedures. I don't think it will be in place in a practical sense during the current campaign, which needs an adjudicatory body that can act quickly to address concerns that are occurring daily, it seems. So to my mind, this is a very unfortunate way that the government has elected to proceed. We thought after last week, they would have seen the sense of not proceeding down this path. It is not going to have our support. It is not going to have support of many people in the wider society because it's a bad idea. And that was extremely capably articulated by one of their senior members on that side last week, himself, I believe, a former ECJ commissioner. So it is an unworkable proposal. The procedures that would govern it don't exist. There's a dire need for something to be put in place promptly. What should have come here was a different piece of legislation, either appointing the political ombudsman for a finite period, maybe a year, as had been suggested, or they should have taken up our suggestion last week, which the Leader of Opposition Business House reminds me that I actually articulated on my feet, which was that we enter into an agreement to appoint a tribunal right now to adjudicate those matters, and that the parties could agree to abide by, at least on a best efforts basis, the recommendations of that tribunal. That tribunal could be appointed immediately and could start to do its work. There's plenty of precedent for that. In your SOEs, these tribunals exist, and so on. That is not, unfortunate, the way the government wants to proceed. They have decided to go down this route today. We feel it is very fraught with problems. We do not think it's in the best interest of Jamaica, and we will not support it because we have to put on record our opposition to bad policy and bad law. Thank you.
Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give support to the bill brought by the minister.
Sorry, member. It must be a question.
Mr. Speaker, as my colleague, the Minister of Finance, pointed out, that letter is about subsuming the Office of the Political Ombudsman in the ECJ. Question of cost sharing was minimal. Truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker, the main cost of the Political Ombudsman Office is the salary to the Political Ombudsman. The others were really minimal: clerks, driver, secretary, administrative assistant. So the cost was minimal. Now, Mr. Speaker, just to close, ever since November 2022, we have been in discussion with the ECJ as to how we are going to appoint a political ombudsman. I pointed out, Mr. Speaker, in my statement in presenting this bill, I said it should be noted that several alternative arrangements were considered and discussed with the ECJ, such as a single commissioner or the selected commissioners assuming the role of the political ombudsman. However, the commissioners were firm in their belief that the role and responsibilities of the political ombudsman is best assumed as an indivisible body. So, Mr. Speaker, with due respect to the leader of the opposition, what the ECJ was pointing out, you have 9 members who can robustly make a decision. And I think, Mr. Speaker, history will show that what we do today in making them look at any dispute, any contention, that it will definitely demonstrate that the strength, independence, credibility of the ECJ will be even further enhanced and will definitely send a signal to political actors when the ECJ rules you comply. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the member from Central St. Catherine, or rather St. Catherine Central, to be correct, is now in the chamber, and I ask that you invite her, the Minister of Culture, Gender, Sports and Entertainment, to make her statement. May it please you, Madam.
Madam Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Statements.
A statement.
You have 2 statements.
2 statements, yes. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, consequent on the Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act coming into operation on Monday, July 3, 2023, every employer and person in charge of an institution is required to issue a policy statement in writing concerning the prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace or institution. Under the law, this policy must be prepared and brought to the attention of each worker, client, student, resident, ward, inmate, patient, or member, as the case may require, within 12 months of the commencement date of the Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act. Mr. Speaker, since the commencement date of the Act was the beginning of July last year, the deadline for government and private workplaces and institutions to develop and implement their policies is the end of June this year. It is vital that every workplace and institution puts in place a policy statement within 12 months of the commencement date of the Act. The effect of this is that no workplace or institution, including ministries, departments, and agencies, has the luxury of choosing when to effect compliance with this part of the legislation. Madam Speaker, I encourage employers and heads of institutions that have not yet completed their policies to take steps to have them in place by the end of June to avoid penalties. And I've written to all the members of Parliament here, and I've attached a checklist and to ask them to assist in ensuring that organizations and individuals are from. I've asked the letter is here to be distributed for each of you, because it's important that we ensure that the policy is in place. The Act specifies what the anti-sexual harassment policies for workplaces and institutions should include. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I shall summarize the provisions. First, the policy shall be in accordance with the sexual harassment framework document set out in the first schedule of the Act. It should include a definition of sexual harassment which is consistent with the Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act. It should include a statement to the effect that 1, workers, 2, clients, 3, students, residents, wards, inmates, patients, or members, as the case may be, at or of the institution, are entitled to an environment that is free of sexual harassment. It should state that disciplinary measures, as are appropriate, shall be taken against any person under the direction of the employer or the person in charge of the institution who subjects any worker, client, student, resident, ward, inmate, patient, or member, as the case may be, to sexual harassment, and that due process shall be exercised in this regard. The sexual harassment policy for respective workplaces and institutions should also outline the internal mechanisms and procedures that are available to a worker, to a client, to a student, a resident, or a member, as the case may be, for the making of any complaint relating to sexual harassment and the resolution and settlement of the complaints. The policy should explain the disciplinary measures that may be taken in respect of sexual harassment. It should also include a statement to the effect that the employer or person in charge of the institution shall not disclose any information relating to a complainant or the circumstances of a complaint to any person except where the disclosure is necessary for the purposes of investigating the complaint or taking disciplinary action in relation to the complaint. Mr. Speaker, importantly, it should inform the workers, the clients, students, residents, wards, inmates, patients, or members, as the case may be, of their right to seek redress from the tribunal on the Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act. Subject to Section 27, subsection 5 of the Act, the policy shall include a statement to the effect that a complainant shall exhaust all internal mechanisms and procedures that are available to the complainant before making a complaint to the tribunal. Section 27, subsection 5, however, allows the tribunal to grant leave to a person to make a complaint without exhausting all internal mechanisms available to him or to her in the workplace or institution. And this may be permitted in specific circumstances. For example, if the person can satisfy the tribunal that she or he may be prejudiced by using the internal mechanisms, or that there are no adequate internal mechanisms to address his or her complaint, then it can go directly to the tribunal. Now, Mr. Speaker, the tribunal, as referred to here, is a sexual harassment tribunal established under the Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act to hear and determine complaints and to make awards. In keeping with the provision of the Act, I, as Minister for Gender Affairs, have consulted with the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Labor and Social Security on my nominees to the tribunal, and have been taking the necessary steps to ensure that all proposed members meet the fit and proper eligibility requirements specified in the Act. It has been a unnecessarily detailed and carefully executed process of evaluation of the proposed members. The final fit and proper report from the Ministry of National Security has been received and will be taken to Cabinet on Monday for consideration and approval of the proposed members of the tribunal. And, Mr. Speaker, we have also begun the process for recruiting the secretary for the tribunal. Already, we have fully staffed the Sexual Harassment Investigation Unit, which will give support to the operation of the tribunal. The unit now has a senior sexual harassment investigative officer and 3 harassment investigative officers. Additionally, the Bureau of Gender Affairs in my ministry continues its public education program. To date, the Bureau has conducted more than 770 sensitization sessions on sexual harassment at more than 700 workplaces and institutions, reaching more than 33,000 people. The Bureau has also been assisting workplaces and institutions to develop and/or review their policies to ensure they are effective and offer the best protection to persons affected by sexual harassment. I've often said and reiterate today that sexual harassment is a serious matter and should not be taken lightly. It has harmful effects on all its victims, be they women or men. Sadly, sexual harassment has been a feature of interactions in workplaces and institutions. We read about it every day. The tentacles of sexual harassment reach deep for those who have suffered at its hands. Often, their complaints have often been dismissed or never entertained. The law changes all of that. The Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act protects all women and men from unwanted sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and crude sexual behaviors that affect quality of life by creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. Mr. Speaker, the law provides relief for victims, punishment for perpetrators, and a deterrent to sexual harassment. So getting this legislation operational is a triumph for all the people of Jamaica today. I again encourage those employers and heads of institutions that have not yet completed their sexual harassment policies to take steps to have them in place by the end of June this year to ensure that we are compliant. If not, there will be penalties. And I encourage my colleague parliamentarians to play their part in ensuring that this is done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this long-awaiting bill. And I want to say to all of us in here, especially those who sat on the committee and the minister, that this is long-awaiting. I want to lend my voice to that I will be one who will be going out there to advocate on behalf of not just women, but on behalf of men as well. But I have a few questions, Madam Minister. After June, and the time has been expired, do you have a mechanism, or do you have the personnel to look at the compliance or the non-compliance? Because it cannot be dependent upon the very same employers to support and to assist you, because some very well is not even willing to have it in their workplace. Also, there's a big group that is going to be left behind, and probably that is the group that is most vulnerable. And I speak to no other than the household helpers. I would like to know what kind of mechanism we are going to use to capture these informal, especially some of the informal shops that are out there that are not registered, but they employ people. What mechanism do we have to make sure they are captured in this policy guideline? Because it's going to be very important, because if you don't be careful, they makes up one of the biggest group that are suffering with harassment. And what I would really want to see happening is a proper policy, not to be depending on the workplace to create, but that a policy is set from the government and is given to each workplace so that they will not differ or to add anything that will make them more comfortable in dealing with matters of this nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleague MP. Yes, there is a mechanism to ensure compliance. We have investigative officers in place. We will be visiting workplaces. And we're also depending on employees to indicate if they see. In fact, the company must display to the public, display in a prominent place, the sexual harassment policy. And so, as we expand the staffing, we will be better able to ensure compliance across. But in the workplace, and certainly in the ministry's department and agencies, we have gender focal points. And they are also responsible to ensure that policy is in place. But in addition to that, if you notice, even the letters that I've sent to you as members of parliament, there is a checklist. You haven't received your letter? We'll check on that. There is a template and a checklist. And there's also the first schedule, which outlines what has to be done in the workplace. We are having in place a really heightened sensitization public education program. And that is why I have to reach out to you as parliamentarians for us to work as one to ensure that we have this network across the island to ensure compliance. Complaints with household health, they can go directly to the Bureau of Gender Affairs, and we will treat with the matter. Because in the homes, you know, you have a problem with your employer. You can't complain to your employer and expect that the matter will be addressed. So household helps are invited to reach out to the Bureau, the Bureau of Gender Affairs, so we can address. And you were saying that to ensure that we have a structured policy outlined across the board, we have a template that we are making available to entities. Thank you.
Second statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll ask for the second statement to be distributed. Now, this is a short statement, but I know it will be a welcome one. Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the objective of the National Sport Policy to provide an enabling environment for all Jamaicans. Now, the statement was sent, and we had asked for it to be printed and distributed. All right. So, in keeping with the objective of the National Sport Policy to provide an enabling environment for all Jamaicans to engage in physical activity and sport, the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport is providing grant funds to jumpstart a holistic effort to promote physical activity and sport at the grassroots level. As a member of UNESCO's Intergovernmental Committee on Physical Activity and Sport, Jamaica must demonstrate its commitment to promoting the Fit for Life program. The Fit for Life is UNESCO's sport flagship program aimed at increasing participation in physical activity and sport through targeted investment. Physical activity and sport can yield a wide range of benefits to individuals, to communities, and society at large. In each jurisdiction, the Fit for Life program will have a different look and feel. In Jamaica, Fit for Life will be multifaceted and proposes to be a harmonized approach to sport development. In this regard, there will be a role for members of parliament. So I'm pleased to advise that in the first instance, there will be a grant of $500,000 approved for each constituency to promote sport development at the grassroots level. This disbursement will allow for community-based projects aimed at improving physical activity and increasing sport in communities to be executed. The grant may be used for the hosting of community sport competitions, purchase of sport gear and equipment. Everywhere a member of parliament goes, somebody's asking for a ball, a football. Field preparation or upgrade of sport facilities. The grant will be accessible through the Sport Development Foundation following successful submission of a proposal detailing the community sport development project to be executed. Grant proposals must identify how community members will benefit from the initiatives and the methods that will be employed to document and track the impact of the investment. Proposals should be submitted no later than March 1. So you can submit your proposals now, and you have up to March 1, because in the fiscal year ends the end of March. So we would want you to use those funds before the end of the fiscal year. The letters will be distributed shortly. Payments will be made on submission of a pro forma invoice by a registered or bona fide community-based organization or to a supplier on behalf of the community-based organization. So the guidelines, it's not stringent. As long as you can prove that you have an organization, there are a lot of clubs in your communities, and you can go ahead and get your performer invoice in the name of the club, and the SDF will process it. The National Sports Coordinator in Sports, Mrs. Anne-Marie Heron, who you all know, because when we do the summer camp, she reaches out to you, that you can reach out to her for further information. And we will certainly expedite the process. It will not be like sometimes other things that take forever. This will be expedited, and I know that your communities will benefit from this program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You know where you're getting, you're and grateful. Madam Minister, I believe sports is really a vehicle that we really should be using more frequently, especially in this country, to bring and to unite people together. So I welcome, and I believe probably it's the first I'm hearing anything of this nature in terms of, I know I'm going to, don't cheer me on. All right. But Madam Speaker, I want to know, because it would be good if we were given a guideline, a set guideline in terms of how much, because you don't want to send in something and then you give people expectations out there, and then you look here that you can only get X or Y. So if it is 500, it means that you cannot go over that. That is what you are saying. But I want to welcome it, but I want you to reconsider, because sports is really what we are going to use to unite this country based on the level of violence that we are exposed to and the kind of polarized communities that we have experienced. So I want to congratulate you, Minister, and just to ask that you lobby and extend this program probably even 3 times per year.
Mr. Speaker, the intention is to expand the program and to continue this program, because we believe in community sports development and community cultural development programs. I came out of such a program out of West Kingston, and we believe that, and we know that sports is a unifying tool, that it's great for social intervention, and giving a corner or a community or a team one football could make a big difference in their attitude and how they work together. And so it's a program that will continue. And that is why when I spoke earlier, I said an initial amount of $500,000, because we intend to continue. There is a template. I must apologize for the documents not being distributed yet, but there is a template and guideline as to the information that should be provided in sending in your recommendations to access the funds.
Madam Minister, through you, Mr. Speaker, I know you mentioned the community clubs that we can assist and community organizations. Will this also be extended to schools, requests from schools, that we can use this resource to assist, like a female football team or equipments for schools? But also, would the minister also, or is it considered, or the minister considering, especially in the next financial year, like how we're at the end of this financial year, upgrades to play fields within communities? Because many of us here have community centers where the play field is just in a deplorable condition. And we really don't have the resources. And when we go to Sports Development Foundation, there's never enough funds in any financial year to assist in the way that is needed. But if we're going to be promoting healthy lifestyle, will the minister consider resources in upgrading? I know 500,000 is a start, but in the next financial year, we'll be considering the upgrade of play fields.
Mr. Speaker, yes, in fact, I'll be meeting next week with the Sports Development Foundation to look at what their plans are for this year. They are limited in terms of funds because you know that the funds also go to Chase. And so SDF gets a ceiling because Chase gets a ceiling. However, we want to ensure that the funds that SDF gets, that we make sure that the country benefits, we maximize those funds. So I'm going to go through their list of proposed fields, play fields, and maybe in cases where we can do different play fields in phases so we can respond to more requests, right? Because there are some basic things we can do. And I know that in every single community there's a play field, right? And at least we need to ensure that they have a surface on which they can play. And when we can fence, we do the fencing. And we have to ensure, though, that they take care of these facilities when they get them. We have actually done an audit. We are updating that audit of play fields across the island. And we will be in touch with each member of parliament to discuss how we ensure that these facilities are cared for once we upgrade them. I also want to indicate that this program, the $500,000, is not just restricted to community, because schools are like communities, schools. And so you can use the funds as well to assist with sports program in the schools, because the schools are a part of the community. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I think I've responded to all the questions that need to be asked. And just to say, make use of these funds. There are some MPs at times, funds are allocated to them and the funds will sit there. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
Announcements?
There is a timeline. You must submit your proposal by the latest March 1. Your letters have a template, so you have some guidelines as to how to complete the request. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Announcements?
Laid on the table of the House are the following: annual report and audited financial statements of the Montego Bay Metro Company Limited for the financial years 2011, 2013, and 2012, 2013. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Aeronautical Telecommunications Limited for the financial year 2022, 2023. And the Integrity Commission report of investigation concerning allegations of impropriety and irregularities in relation to the unknown whereabouts of certain Government of Jamaica motor vehicles belonging to the Ministry of Transport and Mining. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, at the end of last week's sitting, I had asked you whether you could indicate if the Parliament had received. Just wait now. Just wait now. Allow
Members, the member is on the floor. Allow him, please.
He wants to read my mind. Speaker, member from Southeast St. Catherine. Just enjoy the time that you have here. Mr. Speaker, I had asked you whether there were any reports from the Auditor General's Department or the Integrity Commission that have been sent. I noticed that the Integrity Commission's report has been tabled. Unlike the Integrity Commission, the Auditor General does not state publicly when the department sends a report to Parliament. So I'm asking again whether there are any reports from the Auditor General's Department that have been sent to the Parliament that are yet to be tabled. That's the question, Member Chuck.
Member, before me, laid on the table of House are the following: annual report and audit, a financial statement of the Montego Bay Metro Company Limited for the financial year. I am not seeing one from the Auditor General at this time.
I want to be precise in my question. My question precisely is whether any reports have been sent from the Auditor General's Department to the Parliament that have not been tabled. I know what is tabled, I know what is here, and not yet tabled.
I will seek the answer to your question, Member, and give you an answer shortly.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for the recommittal of the item announcements in order to enable the clerk to make a correction that may satisfy the member.
Those in favor? Those against, the ayes have it. Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to correct the date of the annual reports from the Montego Bay Metro Company Limited, initially read 2011-2013, but that should read 2011-2012. Thank you.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, report from committees, notices of motions given orally.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move on behalf of the Minister of Legal Affairs, Legal and Constitutional Affairs, and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Constitution Amendment of Section 61, Act 2024. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next sitting of the House, I will move, be it resolved, with reference to the resolutions approved by this Honorable House on the 12th day of May 2020, containing the appointment of an Integrity Commission Oversight Committee, that the name Mrs. Marissa Dalrymple Filbert be deleted and the name Mr. Donovan Williams be substituted therefore. And, Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion. Mr. Speaker, there's another notice of motion to be given orally at a later point. after certain housekeeping matters have been completed, as it will relate to the carrying over activities subsequent on the prorogation of Parliament. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Question and answers to questions. Motion that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motion relating to sitting of the House. Motion for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave. Sorry. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained.
Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Constitution Amendment of Section 61, Act 2024.
Those in favor? Those against?
Mr. Speaker, I now move that the bill shortly entitled the Constitution Amendment Section 61, Act 2024 be read a first time.
A bill shortly entitled the Constitution Amendment of Section 61 Act of 2024 read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the second reading of the bill.
Public business.
Mr. Speaker, when we adjourned last week, I had moved for the bill to be read a second time, and there was a division, so we just would like to proceed from there.
The motion is on the floor. Those in favor? Those against? Clerk.
Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brownberg, Dr. Chang, Dr. Charles, Mr. Charles Jr., Mr. Chin, Mr. Chuck, Dr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Ms. Daly, Mr. Davis, Ms. Davis, Dr. Dunn, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Ms. Grange, Mr. Green, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Enriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Holness, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Mr. Main, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Miller, Ms. Morrison, Mr. Montague, Mr. Morgan, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Siblis, Mr. Slowly, Ms. Smith, Mr. Terrelong, Dr. Tufton, Mrs. Vaz, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Williams, Mr. Whittle, Mr. Wright, Mr. Charles Jr., sorry, Dr. Chang,
Members, after carefully doing the math, we have 21 ayes and 7 noes. In this instance, the ayes have it. Members, the minister has asked for the matter to be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Clerk.
a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Political Ombudsman Interim Act and to provide for connected matters, read a second time.
The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause.
Mr. Speaker, if there are no objection, we could just put clauses 1 to 9 en bloc. Sorry? Chairman, could you just put clauses 1 to 9?
As it is requested, those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
The title and enacting.
I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against?
Aye. You're in trouble.
The question is that I do report the bill is having passed committee stage. With or without amendment. Those in favor without
Aye.
amendments? I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendments.
Mr. Speaker, I now ask that the bill be read a third time.
The question is that the bill be read a third time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Political Ombudsman Interim Act and to Provide for Connected Matters, read a third time and passed.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier, in relation to the amendment of the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee to include Mr. Donovan Williams in substitution for Mrs. Marissa Dalrymple Philibert. May it please you.
As the request is asked, those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for the recommittal of the item notices of motion given orally in order for me to take the important carryover motion that is a feature of the acts prior to prorogation in order that the business of the House that was unfinished during this session be carried over seamlessly into the next session of the new Parliament. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
As is requested, those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved, with reference to the sessional select, joint select, and select committees, you must not participate in disruptiveness. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved, with reference to the sessional select, joint select, and select committees which are appointed in the current session of Parliament, and where these committees have not completed their deliberations, that in the new session of Parliament, this Honourable House be empowered to enable these committees to proceed with the issues referred to them from the stages reached before prorogation. Be it further resolved that the commission and composition of all these committees remain unchanged, except where necessary, by further motion taken and approved by this Honourable House. And be it further resolved, with reference to the matters identified below, which are included in the order of business in this session of Parliament, but for which deliberations have not been completed, that in the new session of Parliament, the House be empowered to proceed with them from the stage reached before prorogation. 1. The Partnerships General Forms Regulations 2021 Resolution. 2. The Leprosy Repeal Act. 3. The Customs Act 2020. 4. The Segregated Companies Act 2023. 5. The Independent Commissioners of Investigation Amendment Act 2023. 6. the Financial Services Commission Amendment Act 2023. 7, the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider the Criminal Justice Administration Amendment Act 2023, the Offences Against the Persons Amendment Act 2023, and the Child Care and Protection Amendment Act 2023. 8, the Road Traffic Reprieve and Nullification of Prescribed Notices Amendment Act 2024. 9, the private members' motions, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 23, 24, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, and 36. And the Constitution Amendment of Section 61, Act 2024, as approved. The Teaching Council Bill? Yes. And the Teaching Council Bill. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Public business.
I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
The question is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the minister to take the motion, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
This motion is one of those which we would regard as being a customary practice in this Honorable House, that prior to prorogation, we would move a motion which would enable, which were incomplete during the session to be concluded, be carried over into the new administrative year, parliamentary year, as we indicate. So in the context of all of that, Mr. Speaker, I would beg that the motion be approved.
The question is that the notice of which the minister gave earlier be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business for this year in the parliamentary life, of this Honorable House. And in so doing, in this motion of adjournment, I would move the motion for the prorogation of this Honorable House on the 12th of February in the year of our Lord, 2024. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
As is requested by the Leader of Government Business in this Honorable House, question is on the floor. Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. This House don't stand.
Not yet. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
The question is asked. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it that this House be adjourned until a date be fixed.
the Bob Marley 79th birthday celebrations, and you are invited to be a part of it. All roads will lead to Emancipation Park, Tuesday, February 6th, Bob Marley Day, for a musical tribute to Bob with some of reggae's biggest ambassadors. Luciano, Warrior King, Munga Honorable, Jamil, Nadine Sutherland, Christopher Ellis, Slash, Esco Levi, Sugar, Jafabio from Mexico, David Carroll from France, and the mystic revelations of Rastafari. That's a musical tribute to Bob. Emancipation Park, Bob Marley Day, Tuesday, February 6, 7 p.m. Come on out in your numbers to salute the King of Reggae. It will be a natural mystic live on PBCJ.